Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Tri-City Chamber of Commerce 2020 Provincial Election Candidates Debate for the riding of Port... Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Tri-City Chamber of Commerce 2020 Provincial Election Candidates Debate for the riding of Port Coquitlam. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering today on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. My name is Stephanie Booth. I'm a Port Moody resident, and I'm the past chair of the Tri-City Chamber of Commerce. And I'll be your moderator for today. Today we'll be hearing from your candidates of the riding of Port Coquitlam and their party platforms and their plans for our community and province. If you're watching live and have questions, please post in the comments. Questions were pre-submitted and we'll address additional questions if time permits. First, we will quickly go over the format of tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and their party's platform in an opening statement. After opening statements, our candidates will be asked a combination of questions. There's a number of questions that have been prepared by the Chamber and submitted by the business community. We'll be asking our candidates questions until our time is up here today. Based on random selection, one candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to the questions before the floor is opened up to a 1-minute rebuttal for a maximum of 6 minutes of debate. Debate will be closed if we get off topic, and we'll move on to the next question. To finish off, candidates will be given up to 2 minutes to make a closing statement at the end of the night. Candidates, are you ready? Our speaker order predetermined is Eric Minty from the Greens, Mike Farnworth from the NDP, Mayran Zagran from the Liberals. You have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Eric.
Thank you, Stephanie, for the important land acknowledgement. I'm really looking forward to seeing the completion of the Coquitlam First Nation Business Park. It's truly an inspiring story. Unfortunately, a lot of our First Nations communities across BC don't have the same opportunities. Many have plans to provide sustainable energy that are consistently shut down as they're not given fair market opportunities to sell their power back to the grid. This is wrong, and it needs to change. Greens support plans to develop local communities by upholding workers' rights, promoting lifelong education, encouraging entrepreneurship, and providing the social services that people need to keep going through tough times. I share those beliefs, which is why I'm calling for a Center of Excellence for Home Energy Retrofits located in Port Coquitlam. Local jobs, cost savings, and emissions reductions. Everyone wins, and that's how we will move forward. That's what a green recovery means. Poco is my home. It has been for 23 years. I love this town. I moved here to raise a family, and I've taken every opportunity to volunteer as an active member in this community. I'm an engineer, project manager, and an entrepreneur. Very much a get stuff done kind of guy. Like many others, I've been working at home during COVID. And this means I'm spending more time in and around my own community. And it's really highlighted for me the mental and physical health benefits of livable, walkable communities. This is our new reality. We can't just be a car-centric bedroom community anymore, and our plans need to reflect this. The only way we'll get through this crisis is by working together. Everyone was afraid a minority government wouldn't work, but instead, it allowed Greens to bring a lot of really good ideas to the table, helping to create effective policies that are helping people through this pandemic. As Sonia Furstenau said in the Leaders' Debate, every choice we make right now determines our future. We brought civility, cooperation, and good government. We'd like to do more of that. As your next MLA, I'd like to do more of that.
Thank you, Eric. Next up, we have Mike Farnworth.
Thank you, and it's my pleasure to be here and to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Coquitlam Nation. My name is Mike Farnworth. I've called Port Coquitlam home since 1969. I've grown up here. My family's grown up here. It's a place that's like no other. I've had the privilege of serving on City Council and being MLA 6 times, first being elected in 1991. I served in government and in opposition. And during that time, I have always stood up for the interests of our community, putting Port Coquitlam first. And I've developed a reputation in Victoria as someone who's able to work with individuals of all political persuasions to get things done for my community. In 2017, we were elected on a platform of affordability and bringing real change to British Columbians, and especially to the people in the Tri-Cities and Port Coquitlam. I think we've made enormous progress on doing just that, whether it's removing tolls, improving transit, healthcare, education, all key issues for our community. But COVID-19 came along and gave us challenges like we've never seen before. And I'm proud to have been part of a government that I think has led the way in dealing with the COVID pandemic in this province. We have dealt and we have sat back and let the experts, Dr. Bonnie Henry, tell us what to do. We followed up by making sure that everybody's involved, not just in the legislature, but in the community, business, labor, you name it. And we've done a lot of work, but there's a lot more to do. Now we need to not only get through the pandemic, but plan for the recovery. That's what John Horgan has laid out in this election, how we're going to move this province forward, not just for the next year, but for the next 4 years. That's why I'm running for re-election, to carry on the great work and to represent Port Coquitlam and get things done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. And next up, we have Mr. Zargran.
Hello, thank you all for tuning in. My name is Mehran and it's my absolute pleasure to be here tonight. I'm a lifelong resident of the Tri-Cities, a problem solver, a first-generation immigrant, and a BC Liberal candidate for POCO. I'm not a career politician, but a regular citizen. I'm 31 years old and I've worked around the world in a technical and a managerial roles and can bring innovative and expertise to the table. As a project manager, I've become highly skilled in risk management, and I can tell you the best method of managing risk is to eliminate it. So I do rather find it irresponsible that our NDP friends knowingly put our community at risk by calling an unnecessary snap election in the middle of the worst health crisis our province has ever seen. Having said that, rest assured that my Liberal team and I have done everything in our power to keep our community safe during our ongoing campaign. What motivated me to run as an MLA candidate was seeing NDP's track record of poor actions over the past 3 years. Actions that have failed to contain BC's opioid and mental health crisis. Actions that have diminished BC's economic advantage at a time when we need it most. Actions that have raised our taxes when we need savings more than ever. Actions that have hurt BC's natural resource sector amongst the most ethical and sustainable in the world. I could go on and on with ICBC, meaningless incentives, and finally capped off by this election call that jeopardizes our community for a selfish political gamble. We need a fresh approach to these problems. We need to restore confidence and rebuild our economy. The BC Liberal platform will make targeted investment in our law enforcement to keep our communities safe. We will also reduce taxes to make our economy more competitive and keep money in our local communities and businesses. We will make generational investment in transit, roads, and bridges to reduce congestion so that the quality of life we love so much does not get wasted in a massive traffic jam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Zargran. Now we'll move on to the questions and the rebuttal part of the debate. And so what I'll do is I'll read a question. It'll be directed to one candidate, and then they'll have 90 seconds to respond. And then we'll open it up to 1-minute rebuttals from each of the other two candidates. So on the question of debt and economic growth, provincial response measures to alleviate the economic damage created by COVID-19 will leave a massive debt burden for the next generation government to tackle. A cursory glance suggests this won't be achievable without changes to services or increases to taxes. How does your party plan to address the debt? Directing this question to Mr. Farnworth.
Thank you for the question. What's critical right now and what people are concerned about is us getting through this pandemic. Getting through this pandemic in a way that protects families and protects communities, and that's what our plan does. In terms of how we are making and focusing our expenditures, we passed in the legislature the budget of $5 billion in terms of recovery. We want to make sure that, the relief that we are doing is in fact targeted to those areas that need it most. We know that you are not going to be able to balance the budget in the next few years. Everybody acknowledges that. Leading economists acknowledge that on all areas of the political spectrum. So what we're doing is making sure that we've got targeted investments that will allow us to protect employment, get people back to work, encourage businesses to invest, and that over the long term, doing that is going to stimulate the economy, which will allow us to deal with the issues of debt over the longer term. We're already seeing initiatives that we have taken and that the federal government has taken, having that impact in terms of the return of many jobs that were lost when the pandemic first broke out in spring.
Thank you very much. Now I'll call on Mr. Zagran to rebuttal.
Thank you so much. Well, this pandemic has caused half of the households to have a member that is expected to lose someone in their family to jobs. Third of the people cannot pay their rent and bills. And every livelihood that we're talking about is at stake. What our party is doing is looking at reducing or eliminating PST for 1 year and reducing it for 3% the next year. What that will do is it will stimulate the economy. It will have an impact on every citizen of British Columbia. It will have $1,700 roughly for a family of 4. Once the family of 4 can have that support of money, they will be able to use that money to support our local businesses, and that will help us with the local businesses. Also, we are going to eliminate the 2% business income tax, which will take the pressure off the local businesses. We will deliver emergency funding for BC's hardest hit by pandemic through a loan guarantee program for the province's more than 90,000 tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Zagran. Now, Mr. Minty.
Well, I fail to see how eliminating the PST How is that going to help anybody? Like, people are out of work, and you know, people need to get back to work, and you talk about PST. This is a tax cut for the rich, and you know it is, because the things that we pay PST on already, they're already taxed, or the things that are PST exempt are the things that you know, groceries, things that people that are struggling to get by. It's not going to affect those people. It's going to affect the people that are already working. We're not going to have a shopping spree because you cut the PST. It's silly. But I really want to talk about some of the immediate relief measures, and I haven't heard anything specific from the NDP either. And we're talking about rent subsidy programs. We're talking about helping small businesses just get through the winter right now. And the fact that we're here debating instead of governing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minty. So the next question that we have relates to ICBC. Due to the financial mismanagement of ICBC, there's an argument that allowing private companies to enter the market would decrease costs for the average consumer. Does your party have any plans to step in and change the landscape of certain industries that Crown corporations have a monopoly on? And I'll direct this to Mr. Zagran.
Thank you so much. Well, for 3 years, the NDP have been driving up auto insurance rates and have made driving unaffordable for people. It would cost $1,500 for a new driver to $7,000 during the 3 years of NDP. What we plan to do is end ICBC's monopoly, open the market up for competition, just like the Saskatchewan model. That will help the people, especially the new drivers, with the new driver credit for 2 years of, if they have 2 years of driving experience, we will give them a credit. With this opening up the market, it will bring competition, and people have a choice to make. They're not stuck with the ICBC. And I've gone a lot of door knocking. Of course, I'm following the protocols of COVID-19, but a lot of people are very happy with this novel idea, and I think it's a good thing to do to bring competition to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. So now time for rebuttal. So let's start with Mr. Minty.
Well, I think we want to be tinkering around the edges with ICBC. We certainly don't want to be overhauling it completely. I know that there's a new funding model that's out. We should be we need to wait to see the impact of that, and that's going to come in the new year. Listen, competition is good, but there's no evidence to support that a complete overhaul of ICBC and completely privatizing it. There's no evidence to support that actually work. And BC is not Saskatchewan. I'm sorry. I've got 3 kids, right, and they're all driving. One's learning, and I know how expensive insurance is, particularly for young drivers, and that needs to be addressed. But overhauling ICBC is not the right way to do it. There are some changes that can be made. Parts of it could be privatized. I don't believe that the liability insurance side of it makes sense to be privatized. That has worked very effectively. We don't need to just bring more lawyers into it. Like if you look at the models they have for privatized insurance in the States, and they don't work. You look at Washington State. Their insurance rates are comparable to ours. So no, I don't think that overhauling ICBC is the right answer. We do need some solutions, and that needs to be studied, and there are some initiatives that are ongoing. We need to see the results of those, and I think we'll see those in the new year.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. Now, Mr. Farnworth.
Thank you for the opportunity to answer this. Let's be clear. ICBC worked well in this province under social credit, NDP, Liberal governments for decades. It's within this last administration of the BC Liberals that they plundered the resources of ICBC by removing money from ICBC. They ignored warnings that they were putting the corporation on an unsound financial footing. They had a report that went to Cabinet where they removed 4 pages so Cabinet would not be told the truth about what was happening at ICBC. And now they say, oh, the answer is to throw it open to privatization. Well, if you want to know how that works, go to Alberta, go to Ontario. What we have done is put in place measures which will fix it and put it on a sound footing. We have changed the model to a care-based model, such as they have in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, which has worked well in those provinces under alternating governments of whether they're New Democrat or Conservative, and they've done it for years. That's what's taking place in British Columbia. It will result, next spring, you will start to see a 20% reduction in your premiums. That's the answer to the problems that drivers are facing here in this province, as well as in other provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. On to the next question, which is health. A recent Angus Reid survey found that healthcare was the #1 issue for voters 55 and over in BC. While COVID-19 has been front and centre, the province is still facing issues with the opioid crisis, mental health among homeless population, and more. What health investments is your party prioritizing, and why? And I'm going to start with Mr. Minty.
Thank you. So, green philosophy on health is prevention-based. We spend way too much money on our healthcare system needlessly because we haven't focused on prevention up front. And there's still groups that are left out of the healthcare conversation. Groups like people with mental disabilities, and they face deplorable health outcomes, and it's simply because we haven't focused on prevention. And there's just so much to do with health and mental health. We have simply deprioritized mental health to the point the mental health ministry has a lower budget than the office of the premier, and that's just not acceptable in today's world. So these are changes that we need to make. We really need to focus more on mental health, funding that properly, and preventative medicine.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Zagran to rebuttal.
Thank you so much. Mental health is an issue that needs to be prevented. We need to hire the right people to have a correct infrastructure and to be able to address it. Our party's platform is to increase funding by 58 million to help those mentally challenged people and those people with need. We need to have the infrastructure and the resources to tackle these challenges. What has happened in the opioid crisis is it's a second pandemic or a second health crisis that is also happening. We need to have the right resources. We need to hire more resources. So our party's platform is hiring 200 additional police officers, more integrated mobile crisis response team, hire 40 additional crown prosecutors, and the court system to help those people at need. We cannot put them in a tent city or put them in a hotel without addressing their issues. We need to have the infrastructure and the people that are able to support them. So that is what our party is about. We need to hire the correct people. We need to help reduce their issues, and we need to support them. That is what our party is going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sargon. Mr. Farnworth?
Thank you for the question. Under our government, we've put more than $1.6 billion additional into healthcare. We've announced the creation of and the building of 13 new hospitals throughout British Columbia, 21 primary urgent care centers that will bring together physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, counselors, nutritionists in one location. The first one was announced here in the Tri-Cities. That will have a significant impact in terms of ensuring that people get the care that they need and have access to the kind of care that they need, but also to take pressure off our emergency ward system. We've eliminated healthcare premiums, which the BC Liberals doubled when they were in office. That's a significant saving to the people of our community. In terms of mental health, we've invested more than $300 million, and yes, we have created the first standalone mental health ministry of any province in this country. And yes, it has a budget of $10 million, and it's funny that they like to criticize that because, quote, the Premier's office budget is bigger. The reality is this: if they understood how our healthcare system works, the integration that takes place in our hospitals and the delivery of mental health services, they would know that that money that provides the services rests in the Ministry of Health. But that ministry is so large that we thought, to be more efficient, we would create a separate Ministry of Health that is the one that decides the policies around mental health and ensures that they have the time and focus, as our minister said, 24 hours a day. That's what they're focused on, is mental health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farnworth. So the next question is on small business and the economy. What proposals is your party making for small business owners facing permanent closures to assist them and ensure they survive through this difficult period? There's a substantial concern that many of our local businesses will not be around by this time next year. And we'll lead off with Mr. Farnworth.
Thank you for that question. At the beginning, I said one of the key priorities was to ensure that we do targeted relief. That's why, for example, we put in place a PST relief on machinery and equipment for businesses to invest in their business. That's why we've put in place a 15% tax rebate, tax credit when you hire employees. That builds on the work that's been done by the federal government. One of the things that we want to do is to make sure that the policies that we are putting in place are also dovetailing with the policies that are being put in place at the national level to ensure that we get the greatest, the greatest benefit. $300 million has been targeted to those small businesses, particularly in the tourism sector, that have been really hit hard, that in the form of grants that they don't have to repay. What's also critical is ensuring that our healthcare system is there and operating confidence that they can go out to a restaurant knowing that it will be safe, that they can go to work knowing it will be safe. A classic example of that is we have now become a center of excellence in terms of that in the film industry. September was a record month for film and television production in this province because productions are relocating from other jurisdictions because we know that we've done the groundwork on COVID right. That is critical to a recovery. That is critical to long-term confidence. And when you do that, you allow all those other initiatives that we're taking in terms of targeted tax relief to achieve their full benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. First rebuttal is Mr. Minty.
I talk to people. I don't think people feel very safe right now, Mike. Sorry, you talk about people going safe going back to school. I mean, well, we really dropped the ball on that, didn't we? Yes, going back to school. I mean, we're talking about business, okay? But I can't believe you talked about feeling safe. Sorry. You talked about tourism operator grants, and why has the funding for that been delayed? The funding for that has been delayed because we're here having an election. And I keep harping on that point, but you decided to shut down the government instead of helping small business. So we didn't need this. We were operating a perfectly acceptable government, perfectly functional government, and you decided to shut it down instead of providing the funds that were needed. These funds have been held up, and people are suffering, and people are wondering how they're going to get through the winter. So we have these plans in place, we have the money allocated, but it's not going out, and people aren't getting it. And this is the problem. I mean, we can talk about the 6-month rent subsidy program for small businesses, and all these covering 25% of the rental costs. But if the money is held up because we're in an election that we don't need to have, none of that matters.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. Now, Mr. Zargan.
Thank you so much. Now it's time to be bold and brave when it comes to restarting our economy. British Columbians need help now and expected a real recovery plan. Instead, we get an NDP election scheme. This plan could have been there months ago, but it was held up, and now they've given us a recovery plan. It's missing a lot of things. So what we plan to do is eliminate the 2% small business income tax, which will take off the pressure on the small businesses. We will deliver emergency financing for BC's small businesses hit by the pandemic through a loan guarantee program for provinces more than 19,000 tourism and hospitality. We will assist small businesses in adopting COVID-19 protocols, and we will appoint a non-partisan panel to help dramatically reduce the red tape burden on small businesses. And we will take a real action to take a look at the sky-high property tax assessment on airspaces above small businesses. And I would like to also mention that the PST removal for 1 year and reducing it to 3% does have an impact on the small business as well. With the more money in people's pocket, they are going to help the small businesses by making the purchase. I've been door knocking and I've told the people, I saw someone renovating and I told them, when we eliminate the PST, there will be some savings for you. So not only will there be savings for the people doing their renovation, but also the small businesses that provide the supplies for them. So that's the party scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Farnworth, would you like a minute to rebut?
Yeah, on a couple of points. First off, just because there's an election does not mean that money that has been approved by Treasury Board and approved by Cabinet does not flow. It flows, and it is flowing right now, and it will continue to flow. So you are incorrect in your statements there. In terms of the BC Liberals plan, it rests very much on tax relief for, the highest income earners. It doesn't really impact ordinary families, regular families like in the Tri-Cities. That's why our plan to do the $1,000 COVID benefit goes directly to people. They make the decisions where they need to be able to spend that money. Is it on food? Is it on groceries? Is it on rent? Is it on haircuts? Is it on clothing? They get to make that choice. The much vaunted PST tax cut of theirs adds $8 billion to the debt, or to the deficit, and at the same time disproportionately benefits those who are interested in buying a yacht, for example.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. So the next question is on housing and affordability. The speculation tax and foreign buyers tax have remained in place to help slow demand and the ballooning house prices across BC, and yet they are not sufficient solutions to the problem of housing affordability. Apart from taxation, what proposals is your party making to increase housing supply for both buying and renting, as well as to help first-time home buyers get into the property ladder? Mr. Zagran?
Thank you so much. Well, when it comes to housing, we can take a look at NDP's track performance. They broke their promise to ensure affordable housing. Out of the 14,000 houses that they promised, only 2,963 units were opened. At this rate, it will take 100 years for their promise 14,000 houses to be there. And that is and also the strata, there was a strata increase of 1,000% for their insurance premium. What we plan to do is replace the speculation tax that the NDP has to a true speculation tax. That is for the people who are doing condo flipping. And also, we want to have tax relief measures and incentive funding for municipalities such as POCO to help them see what we can do for the people in POCO to help them with their permits and tax permits. And we will work with I will work with the municipalities to review the property tax. So what we want to do is have a plan to have affordable housing instead of fake and empty promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zagran. Mr. Minty, would you like to rebuttal?
Yeah, housing affordability, it hasn't gotten any better. And because, particularly looking at renters, right? We know that 43% of renter households pay more than 30% of their income in rent. And so we need to do something to address this. And we mentioned strata insurance. The rising cost of strata insurance is something that a lot of people are very concerned about. Now, we do know that the BC Financial Services Authority is investigating, and that investigation is underway. As soon as they have a report, we really need to have a task force set up to develop some real solutions to this. The speculators tax hasn't been effective. It hasn't changed anything. How prices continue, right? I mean, during COVID, we've seen a slowdown, but it's just housing affordability is just not being addressed right now. So there are a lot of things that we can do. We can be looking more into co-ops. And even just small things like just close the Bear Trust loophole so we can have increased transparency in ownership. And we really need to close the loopholes in the speculation tax. There's too many of them. There's too many exceptions for foreign owners, satellite families, and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. Mr. Farnworth?
Thank you. Well, our housing plan is working. The BC Liberals are wrong. There are right now 25,000 units either under construction or have been completed, and we're on our way to completing our 58,000 units in the first 5 years. The speculation tax has worked. It has freed up more than 11,000 units that have gone into the rental pool in this province. That has a significant benefit on people. When they talk about, wanting to get away or do away with the speculation tax, that is a tax that doesn't impact 99.1% of British Columbians. And most British Columbians support it. So who are they benefiting by doing that? Once again, it's the wealthy and the well-connected. They want to get rid of the surcharge, the school tax on homes over $3 million. Again, a $200 million tax break for those who can most afford it. In Port Coquitlam, right now, there is a housing project that is being built. It was a project that I announced back in 2001 when I was Minister for Housing in this province. The BC Liberals got elected, and what did they do? They cancelled it. It was a project for low-income families. They cancelled it, and that lot sat vacant for 16 years because they didn't do a thing. Under our government, construction is underway. Those units are going to serve low-income families and women who are feeling domestic violence.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. Mr. Zagran, would you like a minute to rebuttal?
Yes, thank you so much. The speculation tax that we are proposing to do is for targeting the people that are actually flipping their condos. I think that is what we need to target, not the ones that have under NDP. And also, we need to target the people that are the foreign home buyers that are here, coming here buying properties, and that has been the result of the prices that have driven up our prices for the past decade or so. We need to target those. And for my good friends that have mentioned that the Liberal plan is not working, I think Liberal plan is about building housing, about recovery, about post-pandemic recovery. And I think what we are proposing here will work and will bring money to every citizen, especially POCO. It will help restart our economy, and it will be an affordable housing for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sargren. So the next question is on climate change and the environment. The transition to a lower carbon economy will require buy-in from businesses to make Clean BC initiatives more accessible. Would you support offering more upfront funding and support as opposed to rebates and reimbursements? And what other initiatives is your party proposing to help businesses play a bigger part in the transition to a lower carbon economy while supporting economic growth? And I'll start this one off with Mr. Minty.
Well, thank you for that question. This is what I'm talking about right here. So there's a huge opportunity. Port Coquitlam is a perfect place to do exactly this, where we can rebuild. We can have a green economic recovery. What I'm talking about with the Center of Excellence, it's an opportunity to bring stakeholders together. And it would be an ongoing process that we could accelerate the adoption of clean energy solutions for homeowners and bridge gaps, remove barriers. And I think from the latest throne speech from the federal government, there was some federal funding available for that as well. So it brings together entrepreneurs, innovators, skilled trades, construction contractors, homeowners, and supporting services to really accelerate that adoption for homeowners to retrofit their homes, whether it be with electric heat pumps or solar panels or whatever it is, and other solutions as well. And the one element that has been delayed and really needs to happen is the property assessed clean energy solution, and it's a proven solution that helps homeowners to be able to finance these things without breaking the bank, but then they can pay it off over time through their property taxes. So there's all kinds of solutions we bring together. We bring that here in Port Coquitlam. We have all the things necessary to be able to do that. Everything right here. So this is kind of one of the big things that is just a very passion for me.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. Rebuttal from Mr. Zargran.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to mention that under BC Liberal government, BC was globally recognized as a leader in climate action. We introduced North America's first revenue-neutral carbon tax, a decision strongly opposed by the NDP. I would like to point out that the carbon emissions have gone up by 3.5% since 2018. I'm a climate advocate myself, and these data is available readily for anyone Googling it. They've gone up from 63.3 million tons annual emission to 65.5 annual emissions. So, the NDP government has increased the carbon tax, abandoned the revenue neutrality, raising costs for families and at the gas pumps to heat up their homes. So, our plan is to bring back the revenue neutral carbon tax and get away with increasing the carbon tax. And we will follow the federal government's protocols. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Zargran. Mr. Farnworth?
Thank you for that question. It's interesting to listen to the Liberals talk about climate change, because when they were in government, they convened a climate change panel that came in with recommendations, and then they subsequently ignored every single one of the recommendations. When we came in, we worked very closely with Andrew Weaver, Dr. Andrew Weaver, leader of the Green Party, and with industry and with environmental groups, and put together Clean Energy BC as our climate action plan. It's focused very much on BC's strengths and advantages around renewable energy, and will allow us to transition to where we need to be over the next number of years. One of the goals, for example, that we intend to achieve is for all new buildings to be carbon neutral by 2035. We're putting in place $105 million to assist industry this year in terms of being able to adapt. We are increasing incentives for electric vehicles. We have made it clear that we have targets in place. There is accountability legislation that requires us to report on the progress that we are making. We have a solid plan. It was done collaboratively, and it's a plan that will work for BC.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. Mr. Minty, would you like a minute to rebuttal?
So Clean BC is only 75% complete, and so it's not really a plan. Well, I mean, it's a start of a plan, but it's not complete. So there's still more work to do on it. But the biggest flaw in Clean BC right now is that the single biggest point emission, and you know this is coming, this is the elephant in the room, and it's LNG. And we cannot base an economy on fossil fuels and claim that we're going to have a credible plan to address climate change and have a zero emissions. Like you talk about, what do you want to get to carbon neutral by 2050? Well, we can't do that with LNG. It's just that the math isn't there. We can't do it. There's no way of doing it. And you might want to talk about future technology and being able to, but to reduce emissions on LNG and fracking. You can't get there with LNG, and that's the bottom line. So with an economy based on that, you can't meet those targets. So there's no plan to get there. So we need.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. So on to the issue of childcare. In the recent federal throne speech, there was general proposal towards a comprehensive Canada-wide childcare and early education initiative to assist parents to return to the labour force sooner. Given the pre-pandemic labour shortages many businesses were facing in BC, this seems to be a likely needed program. However, this also crosses into provincial jurisdiction. Will your government improve access to childcare by introducing measures to strengthen private and not-for-profit childcare options and use public funds to fill in the gaps for childcare? This question, Mr. Farnworth, start off with.
Thank you. When we were elected in 2017, we said that comprehensive childcare, $10 a day childcare, was a critical goal of our government. We've made significant progress in that area. More than 11,000 spaces, 63,000 kids now have quality childcare in this province. And we recognize that childcare runs the full spectrum. What we want to do is to make sure that what the federal government is doing works for us as a province. And the cooperation we've had from the feds in that regard, I think to date has been very good. And so I'm confident that the changes that they make will work and assist and in fact enhance what we're doing here in BC. Since we introduced our changes in our child care plan in this province, more than $13 million has been invested right in Port Coquitlam alone in terms of reducing child care costs for families in Port Coquitlam. And of that, $8 million went directly into families' pockets. We know that in terms of recovery, but more importantly in terms of where we need to be of BC's economy, not just in small business, but medium-sized business and large business, one of the biggest concerns of employers is quality childcare. We have a plan. We are implementing that plan. That plan is already working. You can contrast that with the Liberals who now say, oh, me too, we have a plan. They say $10 a day daycare. But guess what? If you take the average income of a family in this city of Port Coquitlam of $84,000, most people won't qualify for the $10 a day.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. Mr. Sargrand, do you want a rebuttal?
Thank you so much. BC Liberal government will implement $1 billion to bring $10 childcare for low-income families. So I would like to point out it's $10 per day for families with an annual income of up to $65,000. So if your income is anything below $65,000, you will need to pay the $10 per day. It will be $20 per day if your income is up to $90,000, and $30 per day if your income is up to $125,000. We have also promised to bring 10,000 new daycare spaces. We will work collaboratively with the federal government to further expand childcare options, and we will expand training and support better qualified childcare workers. We'll also double the number of midwives graduating in BC every year so that the infrastructure is there for the future generation when they need support. We're going to be there. We are all about investing in the infrastructure and planning ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sargrand. Mr. Minty?
Well, the whole early childhood education portfolio is a little bit upsetting. I spoke to Sonia first now about this directly, and I know she was working over the summer very closely, and previous to that with Minister Chen on that, and to have the Premier throw her under the bus the way that he did was quite shameful. And I know that she's very passionate about this and has been working very hard on it. And there's a lot of really good initiatives coming out of it. And that really came about as a result of the cooperation, the collaboration. And there's all kinds of great things coming out of that. But one thing that Mikey didn't mention and that we do need is training for more ECEs in certified programs, establishing professional wages for ECEs. And if you have a $10 a day childcare, and if you have, the way that we want to structure the early childhood education will ensure chronic underfunding of that program, and then you can't also ensure professional wages and have it. It's like this overconstrained problem. So the way that it's structured needs to be rethought, and I think that we've made some good progress on it. We're making good progress on it, and we can make more progress on it. Again, but we have to be working together and not doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. I'm going to go off script just a little bit here and just ask each candidate a question and answer in 30 seconds. It's to do with childcare. If elected, would your government consider a two-tier kindergarten system, junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten, as in other provinces, as a means to address these issues? So I'll start with Mr. Minty first.
Yeah, you put me on the spot there. I honestly, I don't know about I don't know about that. I'm not going to try to make something up on the spot here on that. I'm afraid. Yeah, we have to go back to see what the evidence works on that.
Perfect. Mr. Farnworth?
Yeah, thank you. I'm always careful when someone says, do you want to put in place a two-tiered system? What we want to do is ensure that every child receives quality, equitable care or education. That's why we've invested considerably in early childhood education. So I would want to know a bit more in detail about exactly what's being proposed. What I can tell you is we have a child care plan in place. It's working. As I said, 11,000 spaces, 20,000 spaces in 2 years is a pretty remarkable achievement, and we're going to continue doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. Mr. Zagran?
Thank you so much. I can tell you that as an assistant professor for University of British Columbia, education is very important to me. So Liberal plan to upgrade K2 facilities is very good. We will build new schools throughout the province and ensure options for full-time regular school in a safe environment during the COVID pandemic with home learning and also in-school learning to make sure that the COVID protocols are adhered to. Regarding the question that you asked, I cannot answer on the spot, but it is something that we will take a look at and answer you in the future.
Thank you very much. So now we'll get into the next issue of tax. Are there any tax plans that your party is proposing to lessen the burden on businesses or individuals in response to COVID-19? And we'll start this one off with Mr. Zargran.
Thank you so much. Well, as I've mentioned, the theme throughout the night is the PST elimination for 1 year and reducing it to 3% the next year. We've heard a lot of opposition to this plan, but we believe this will help the family of four with $1,700 that they can use to help them. And we'll also reduce the small business income tax of 2%. I think it is time to help our struggling economy, help our people, and what the Liberal Party is doing is helping reduce the taxes. We're all about reducing the taxes and creating jobs and helping the small businesses and our most hit tourist industry. So I've mentioned all the tax reductions that we plan to do in our businesses, and I think it will be a very, very tough winter for all of us, and we need to reduce the taxes. We need to stimulate the economy. And to the gentleman of the Green Party that mentioned how are we going to pay for that, we're in a wartime economy. We need to make sure that we can get through this. Every Western country is running a deficit, and we can run a deficit. Once the pandemic is over, once the vaccine is there for us, then it will be up to 5 years before we can run a balanced budget. But we need to help our citizens. We need to reduce the taxes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Zargran. Mr. Farnworth?
Thank you. So in our plan, we've laid out the tax measures that we want to see. So, for example, targeted PST in terms of machinery and equipment, encouraging businesses to invest. Maintaining competitive business taxes with other provinces. We have some of the lowest in the country. Personal tax rates that have not gone up for working and middle-class families in this province. In fact, unless you're in the very top bracket, your taxes have not increased. Yet what we hear from the BC, and we have put money back into people's pockets by eliminating MSP premiums, tolls in the case of, which is so important to hear for people in the Tri-Cities, $1,600 a year, $900 a month for a family of MSP premium savings. That's pretty significant. But what we hear from the BC Liberals is, they're going to get rid of the speculation tax. They want to get rid of the employer health tax. Well, when you do that, where are you going to make up the revenue? Are you going to bring back the MSP? They like to complain. They said that they're going to put in place a tax review panel to review 23 taxes. What they don't tell you is that amongst those taxes are tobacco taxes. Are they going to cut tobacco taxes on cigarettes? I would suggest we don't, but they've been going out saying, the NDP raised taxes in 23 areas. Frankly, they've been favoring the top tier. It's time you have a government that favors regular people.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. Mr. Minty?
Well, so one thing we haven't talked about is the opportunity for more progressive property taxes. This is something that I think we can do. Right now, as you know, our municipal property taxes are fairly flat, and so there's an opportunity to have that either indexed to, or you can have rebates against the amount that you pay in income tax, and that will also help reduce speculation as well for people who don't pay income tax and maybe own very high very expensive properties. Looking for opportunities to make taxes more progressive helps the people who need it the most. That's important to me, so I think those are the kinds of things we need to be doing. If we're looking at really irresponsible, sort of wide sweeping tax cuts, like eliminating the PST. I mean, yes, you want to stimulate the economy, but that's not the way to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. Mr. Zargan, would you like a minute to rebuttal?
Yes, thank you so much. I'd like to point out that instead of providing relief for increased taxes, NDP have only deferred them. They have introduced 23 new taxes and increased the taxes that were there before 2017. The taxes have increased by $5.7 billion under NDP, an average of $4,700 per household. While the NDP has deferred major taxes to October 3rd, they have not actually given a break on those taxes, which are still owed. And the ICBC premiums, we were supposed to receive those, but we haven't yet. So I would like to mention that under BC Liberal platform, we want to help every citizen by reducing the taxes and not increasing them or introducing new ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Earlier, we talked about health and we touched a little bit on homelessness. So this next one is specific to homelessness. Homelessness affects us all, whether it be the business community or the larger Tri-Cities community. What will your party do to address this growing issue? And I'll start this one off with Mr. Minty.
That's a tough one. I think we need to start out with the acknowledgement that homelessness is a real problem, and it touches so many things. We can't treat homelessness as a crime. I know we've talked about, and I've heard some people talking about, getting tough on homeless people and evicting people from homeless camps and things like this. This is not the way to address the issue. Now, I know that if you look at what the federal government is doing, seems to be, whether they want to or not, they seem to be moving in the direction of a basic income, and that's something we definitely support. And we'll work together with the federal government to provide a basic income for everybody. Low-income rental housing supports and these things. So everybody deserves a place to live. And this is basic. I don't even know why we shouldn't even be having this conversation, but we are. And things haven't gotten better for people. There's more people than ever, and it's a growing problem. And it hasn't gotten better under the Liberals, and it hasn't gotten better under the NDP. But we need to start from a place of kindness and caring for each other, not putting people in prison for the crime of being homeless.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. Mr. Farnworth?
This is a real problem that has been with us for quite some time. Our government takes this issue very seriously. That's why we've created more than 3,800 homes for people who are homeless. Been working with communities to identify key areas where modular housing can go in. Working to ensure that the support services are there for people when they need them. This is a long-term problem that started many years ago. But let's be clear, what the Green Party says is we do have to come from a place of compassion. That's why we've increased, funding for mental health and addiction services, recognizing that is a critical part of the issue. But let's not also forget that communities do deserve to feel safe. And that's not, quote, a law and order issue, it's a community issue, because there are those who prey on the vulnerable. There are those who go into the camps and commit criminal activity, and people aren't safe. And those individuals should be prosecuted, and those individuals should be charged. But we need to understand that kindness and compassion are critical.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Mrs. Zargan?
Thank you so much. Everyone deserves a place to call home, and support for those experiencing homelessness doesn't end with housing alone. Our most vulnerable citizens are left on the streets of our cities, many suffering from brain injuries, addiction, and untreated mental illness. We need to treat the underlying medical causes of mental illness and addiction. We need to prevent harm to anyone involved. NDP have abandoned these neighborhoods and done nothing more than warehouse people who are seriously ill. So our party is moving away from that and trying to solve the underlying issue by providing support and health to those people at need. That is what our party's platform is about, not putting them in a tent or putting them in a hotel where they are suffering and they need support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sargon. Mr. Minty, would you like a minute to rebuttal?
along with homelessness, we know that we know that addiction is a serious issue, and the opioid crisis hasn't gone away. We need to decriminalize. We need to decriminalize drugs. We need to instruct our police not to be arresting people for the simple crime of possession. I'm looking at the Minister of Public Safety right now. And we need a safe supply for people, and to remove the barriers so that they can access that safe supply in a way that's COVID safe, that takes their concerns into account. And these are things that we've known for decades. And we've been moving slowly towards it, but we need to move more quickly, because the problem is only getting worse.
Thank you very much. So we have time for one more question, and it's more of a general question. If successful in this current election, what would be your first priority to achieve for the Port Coquitlam community? And I'll start it off with Mr. Farnworth.
I think it's to continue the work that we're doing in terms of keeping people healthy and safe in the COVID pandemic. I think that's the number one priority for the people of our community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zargran.
Thank you so much. If elected, I would like to focus on the homelessness issues in POCO and address the people that are really suffering in our communities. That is my passion, and I would like to address that if elected. Thank you.
Mr. Minty?
Yeah, just as everybody said, we need to get things moving again, and there's funding available for different things, and we need to get that money going, and not held up. And there have been delays, and despite what Mike had said earlier, there have been delays, and people haven't been getting the money that they were promised. So we need to deliver on our promises, and yeah, we need to just deliver on the promises that we've made, and there's more to be done in terms of in terms of providing the funding where it's needed. That's the first order of business, and then there's so many other after that.
Thank you very much. And we do have time for one more question. This is a public question. Many young people are having to take on massive debt to attend university, college, or trade school. What is your party doing to support young people with education, debt, and other skills training issues? We'll start this one off with Mr. Zagran.
Thank you so much. Well, the Liberal platform is addressing that issue with increasing the funding for university students with high school students and supporting them. We will help the students with building the infrastructure for schools, building more schools, reducing the taxes for them. And as an assistant professor in the University of British Columbia, I do understand what the students are going through, especially with the pandemic. I have a debt of student loan as well, and I know what the students are suffering. So our Liberal government will support them with these initiatives. It is in our party's platform, and we can take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zagran. Mr. Farnworth?
Thank you for the question. We've taken a lot of action since becoming government. We've eliminated the interest on student loans. We've added more than 2,300 student residence spaces so that there's places for them to live while attending facilities. We have made an additional 27,000 apprenticeship spaces available. We've eliminated fees for adult basic education. We've ensured that children in care are able to get post-secondary education free of charge. That contrasts significantly with the neglect where school fees, university fees, tuition fees tripled under the BC Liberals. We're ensuring that public infrastructure programs have apprenticeships in place to train young men, young women, First Nations kids in a way that we have not seen. Public dollars should be used for public good, and that means not just building a bridge or a transit system, but ensuring that young people have opportunities to get their skills on those projects. That's what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. Mr. Minty?
Yeah, there's still gaps that need to be addressed. We have this BC Access grant, and it can be expanded to support part-time students in multi-year programs. But another thing, it's not just about education, and it's not always just about throwing a whole bunch of money at things. There's better ways of solving the problem. Like affordable childcare so that people can go to school and and have their children cared for. So, like people that are in a nursing program, you get a lot of people in nursing programs and they just can't afford to go to school, and then they're racking up debts because then they have the childcare. So these things all intersect with one another. So it's not just a single issue about throwing money at post-secondary education. I mean, that's important. They need to be funded, but you have to look at it from all the different angles of society and different people that are involved. And there's opportunities as well for professional development programs, teaching assistants, and early childhood educators. And I mean, there's other groups that we need to expand those sort of professional development programs for them so that they have so they have the expertise.
Thank you, Mr. Minty. Mr. Sagran, would you like a minute to rebuttal?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so now it's time for our closing remarks. So each candidate will have 2 minutes for their closing remarks, and we'll start in reverse order. Then we open. So we'll start with Mr. Sagran.
Thank you so much. Our province is at a crucial crossroad right now. We're in the midst of a health crisis. Our province's competitiveness is fading away. Our job losses are growing. Our local businesses are flattering, and our savings are depleting. I know you work very hard and contribute so much to BC, so you deserve a government that not only keeps you safe during this difficult time, but also values your long-term prosperity in BC. And it is clear, only the BC Liberal platform accomplishes both of these goals. A vote for me is a vote for a government that will never risk your public safety for the political gamble like the NDP did during this election call. A government that invests in roads and bridges to bring our communities together. A government that values well-paying jobs and invests in our natural resources, the most ethical and sustainable in the world, rather than an NDP government that spends millions fighting them. A government that replenishes your savings long-term with lower taxes and cheaper auto insurance by eliminating the ICBC monopoly, rather than a government that is more focused on saving their own face and handing out one-time gimmicks. And finally, a vote for me is a vote for novel, fresh ideas that are in tune with our fast-growing world as opposed to out-of-touch ideas. And it is clear we can restore BC together. And the first step is your vote for a Liberal government and as me as your MLA. Thank you very much for staying here and listening to us. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sagran. Mr. Farnworth?
Thank you, and I want to thank all the candidates who put their names forward in this election. Having done it many times, it is a challenge, and so I just want to thank them for participating in our democratic process. On October 24th, the voters of Port Coquitlam have a choice. They can choose to vote for a candidate who has represented them in government and in opposition, and who understands our community, who's called it home since I was a small boy of 10 years old, and have, as I said, developed a reputation to work with people of all parties to get things done and to do what's right for Port Coquitlam. As part of a team led by Premier John Horgan, whom I believe has established himself as a competent premier that's provided competent leadership during a very challenging time with this COVID pandemic. We have a plan to get us through this pandemic together. We have a plan to rebuild and recover in our province over the next 4 years, but that requires a mandate. The other alternative is to go back to the ways of the BC Liberals, where they governed for a select few, where they gave tax cuts to those who didn't really need them at the top of the income spectrum, where it was all about friends and insiders, where you saw your car insurance increase because of a government that basically plundered ICBC of its cash reserves, a government that at this election really is devoid of a plan. I believe that the citizens of Port Coquitlam know which direction to go, which is one of optimism, which is one of hope, which is why I am running for re-election, which is why I am asking for your vote to continue that good work, to ensure that we have a community that we can all be proud of. As I like to tell people, having grown up there, I've walked our streets, our sidewalks, I know the river, I know the mountains, I know the parks, I know our people, I know our community, and I got the passion and energy to represent us well in Victoria. and with your support, I can continue to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Farnworth. Mr. Minty.
Thank you, Stephanie, and the Chamber of Commerce, and Mike and Mehran for being here tonight. Your presence makes us all stronger. It's so true. Now, we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out first, and I had this sort of prepared script, but I just want to go off script for a second and say I know the NDP and Mike, you talk a lot about spending money and spending money and spending money and all the money that you like to spend, and we don't talk enough about outcomes and the real outcomes, and the whole BC Green Party platform is outcome-based. We need to stop wasting money on failing industries and solutions that don't work. We need a moratorium on fracking. We need assistance now for low-income renters, not 3 months from now, and establishing a livable income, working together towards that. We need to give stratas the tools that they require in order to bring their insurance costs under control. We need things like safe cycling corridors, and I don't want to keep seeing empty homes when there are people who can't find a place to live. We need to ensure that people with mental disabilities do not continue to be left out of the conversation on health. And nurses, teachers, and other essential service providers, they need real hazard pay. They do not need more broken promises. The full Greens platform is very extensive and it's well researched. I simply can't do it all justice here in the 2 minutes that I have, but it is based on real outcomes, a real plan, and real leadership. But there's more than 2 choices in this election. There's 4 choices, and it's unfortunate Luz couldn't be here tonight, but so there's more than 2 choices. It's not just Liberal versus NDP, but the only way that you can ever get what you want is to choose what you actually believe in, and to be kind to each other and patient. It takes time, but the future is green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minty. And thank you to all the candidates. It takes great courage to run for office and work to serve the community. And to the viewers, make sure you get out and vote on October 24th. Your vote does make a difference. If you need more information, you can visit www.elections.bc.ca to find the nearest voting location to you. Thank you and have a great night.